Paris, the largest gathering of world leaders on the planet, and the challenge is how to save it. The crucial climate talks are underway in Paris. The hope is that within 2 weeks a deal will be done to reduce global carbon emissions. To avoid disaster, scientists say average temperatures must not rise more than 2 degrees, but making that happen is fraught with difficulties. Our International Affairs editor Raghi Omar reports from Paris on the efforts to save a climate in crisis.
They are the hardest and seemingly unresolvable challenges to our Earth's future, from warming temperatures that threaten the most delicate and most beautiful habitats, to the sensitive issue of asking developing countries to slow their rate of industrialization, to soil erosion spreading poverty and hunger, and rising sea levels putting at risk tens of millions living along coastal communities around the world. Just some of the vital issues campaigners are demanding that the 150 world leaders here tackle and not just discuss. And there's a sense that this conference here represents a defining moment.
This is a turning point. This is the moment we finally determined we would save our planet. Is the fact that our nations share a sense of urgency about this challenge and a growing realization that it is within our power to do something about it.
Others said climate change affected everyone's children and grandchildren, whether descended from prime ministers, paupers, or princes.
Your deliberations over the next 2 weeks will decide the fate not only of those alive today, but also of generations yet unborn. So I can only urge you to think of your grandchildren as I think of mine, and of those billions of people without a voice.
The president of Kiribati, whose 32 islands are only 2 meters above sea level, says his nation may not exist in 50 years.
For those of us whose survival, whose very survival is at stake, our plea is very simple. Let us give substance to the pledges that are being made.
World governments have agreed a limit of an average 2 degrees Celsius in temperature rise by 2100. But after submitting proposals to achieve this, it's predicted we're on course for a rise of between 2.7 and 3 degrees, which could still see as many as 75 million people at risk of hunger, 3 billion at risk of water shortages, and socioeconomic problems in developing countries.
I have been listening to the leaders' statements, and they are wonderful statements. My judgment on this conference will be, does it actually help those who are suffering most from the impacts of climate and have contributed least?
It's that willingness of world leaders gathered here to tell their negotiators to come up with a binding deal that serves all that will be the difference between success and failure. Raghi Omar, ITV News, Paris.
Well, as that conference got underway in Paris, the need for action was underlined by thick, hazardous air pollution blanketing both New Delhi and Beijing. In the Chinese capital, it's literally off the scale that's used to measure it. Our China correspondent Lucy Watson reports from Beijing on the daily battle with air pollution.
You can barely see buildings and only make out cars if they have lights on. This is Beijing's smog at 4 o'clock, and where wearing masks has become a way of life.
This is really a bad day. I mean, you can see it, you can smell it, you can taste it. People can't breathe. Those who are sensitive may get asthma attacks. On the long term, and that's also very worrisome, over many years, we also see a marked increase in cancer or chronic respiratory problems.
Even tourists in Tiananmen Square are blanketed in the toxic haze as the afternoon sun strains to be seen.
The pollution is more than 20 times the recommended health limit today. Coal and cars being the biggest culprits, and with more than 80% of people living in China exposed to unhealthy air, there's a deepening awareness of the gravity of this problem.
It's so difficult for me to breathe. I have been coughing for 2 months. I feel like I'm suffocating whenever I come outside.
The government should fix it. It's down to their lack of regulation. There are too many factories and too many cars.
They are the dark consequences of China's rising prosperity. Yet the country did spend more than any other on solar, wind and hydropower last year. But that is poor consolation for a mother nursing her child outside hospital on the type of day when admissions significantly increase, the elderly and children being the most vulnerable to tiny poisonous particles. Today, China's very visible scourge. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Beijing.
Right, let's go back to Paris, and our science correspondent Alok Jha is closely following the talks, of course. Alok, how much optimism is there, and how much might our lives change under any new agreement?
There's a lot of optimism here. We've never had this many world leaders in one place before, and they're all here making their speeches to let the people in these halls know how seriously they're taking this issue, how much they want people here to make a deal happen within the next few weeks. And as to how much our lives will change, well, in Britain we may notice very little if there's a deal here, because electricity from clean or renewable sources is the same as electricity from dirtier, polluting fossil fuel sources. So, you know, your cars and everything else, your homes will be the same for a start. But actually, what you might notice in the future is that your home is more efficient. It's using less energy. You might notice that your cities are cleaner because the cars are more efficient and not producing so much pollution. Your coal-fired power stations have gone, so the air is cleaner. And in the far future, you'll notice that there's more electricity in the cars that we're using. So therefore, these are subtle changes, but they all add up to a much better environment.
All right, Alok,